This knife is called the kikirikiri, and it's a pun. This is actually one of the reasons why people will break knives, why people will go, I don't like cooking because this doesn't feel good. When you use a good knife, you get addicted to the feeling of a good cut. When you cut a tomato and it just glides right through, holy shit, that feels fucking amazing. One of the things I absolutely hate and despise about these kind of German and French knives with this big heel here is this does not cut. This part of the knife does not cut and just gets in the way. You have this big chunk of steel that's doing nothing over here. This is stupid. And this is a function of that stupid tang idea. Why? Why? So when we design this knife, one of the things I also know that is very common, and you'll see this in pretty much all of my knife designs, we'll create a choil that goes into the blade and cuts out over here. What this does is that when you're holding the blade and when you're using it and you're doing any kind of cut, a lot of the times, especially if you have a stupid forward swoop like this, you'll cut, and then because of where your fingers are positioned, you think you have more blade over here, but you actually don't. And then you get what I call hanging cuts, where you don't cut through something all the way, and then it's just hanging there, and then it's just really annoying, because then you have to go back and go between all those cuts and recut it again, and it's the most annoying thing in the world. And you could just, all you have to do is design the blade a little differently, not have a stupid bolster right there that's blocking everything, and just have something that comes either flat or back a little bit. If you have it flat, at least you know where it is. And if you have it back a little bit like this, now that's gonna make it so that when you're rock chopping, when you're push cutting, it will cut through the back because it's where your finger is. This blade design, as you can see, is German in nature. However, there are subtleties to this knife design and the blade shape. You can see at this angle here, there's a much larger belly, which means that you are able to do this rock chopping motion significantly easier. And this is primarily what these knives are good for. The Gyoto is a Japanese knife that is made in the style of a Western knife. So it does have this curve to it that allows for a little bit of rock chopping and a flatter edge at the back, which allows for the push cutting. This one is designed in the middle as well. This one has sort of a Gyoto design where we have the belly over here, a much larger one than this Gyoto. And that's why we have the wider, flatter blade. But also, we end that belly around the middle here to preserve the flatter cutting surface in the back here. That allows us to do the push cut so that when you're cutting like this, you can use the back of the blade still like a Japanese knife. So this is going to be more of a hybrid between the German European style blade and a Japanese style blade as well, which I think is pretty fitting for someone like Kiara, right? The parts over here also are designed specifically, and I measured this out. I have large hands, right? My hands are going to be in the top like 5% of hand sizes. Even if I want to hold it back with a 4-finger grip, we did design it so that it does not reach there. You can see I did actually measure where this is. And let's talk about grip, because it's also important where your fingers are to understand where your grip is. These knives, the reason why they're also designed like this is they're designed for people who don't use the knife right. We should not be designing knives for the lowest common denominator. Just learn a little bit about the knife before you use it. This here, the reason why it's back is so people can hold it like this, like a hammer. Do not hold your knives like this. This is called a hammer grip. We do not use the hammer grip. This is unwieldy, it has no control, and it is just bad overall. You won't be able to cut, you'll hit your knuckles on the cutting board. No hammer grippy! Do not do this! No hammer grippy! You can't cut well like this. You have no control over the knife. You're holding it like a hammer, like you're like trying to swing this, and this is actually one of the reasons why people will break knives, why people will not like cutting with knives, why people will go, oh, like I don't like cooking because this doesn't feel good. When you use a good knife, you get addicted to the feeling of a good cut. When you cut a tomato and it just glides right through, holy shit, that feels fucking amazing. That's what we call kiriyaji, the flavor of the cut. And when you get to experience such a good flavor of the cut, when everything goes through, you just start to cut and you go, oh my God, do I have anything else to cut? Does anyone need more pico de gallo made? And then like everyone gets mad at you because like you keep like cutting things and then like you don't actually think about what you're actually gonna be using that for, and then they're gonna be like, all right, dude, you already made like a stash of onions. Like what the fuck are we gonna do with like that pile of onions? And you're like, I don't know, man. I just want to cut more things. I didn't figure out what to do with all those potatoes and onions in the fridge, honestly. Do not do this. This is why your cuts suck. This is why knife feel bad. Do it right. If anyone wraps their hand around this and then goes, man, this handle ain't so ergonomic for using it like a hammer, then I'll be like, why the fuck are you using it like a fucking hammer? You're telling on yourself. Instead, we use it the right way. This is called a pinch grip. This is what Michelin star chefs use, what you're taught in culinary school, and generally speaking, the proper knife grip. What you do is you pinch on the blade, not near the handle. Your fingers do not touch the handle, because you shouldn't be pinching back here, you should be pinching on the blade itself. That's what gives you the most control. Simply rest your fingers, wrap around. What you can do also is you can actually put your finger here first. Oh, flipping off the camera, whoops, sorry guys. You put your middle finger here first with the choil, and then you'll see why this has a larger curve here. It's to support your pinky finger and your ring finger, which are smaller than your middle finger, and align them in generally the same position, which gives you more control over the blade as well. And now you'll see this is why chefs have so much control, because this feels like a natural extension of your hand. The other grip that is okay, forefinger grip. This one is where you want your forefinger over here, and the thing with pinch grip is that because your fingers are on the blade here, if you're trying to use the back of the knife in something like this, in a horizontal cut where you're parallel, and you have big hands like mine, you might hit the cutting board. Or you're trying to cut something and you want to have the full use of your knife, and your fingers, if I cut like this, would get in the way. If you do that, and you want to be able to use the full length of your blade, in those two scenarios, you can use a forefinger grip. That puts your fingers out of the way. Your pinky, basically, you choke back on the handle as much as possible, wrap around, and put your forefinger over here. Now, you see, it's much easier for me to do any kind of slice because my knuckles are not as in the way. And now I can do a draw cut, easier as well. And I can do a slice. You can also rock chop like this. Yeah, I will say this blade shape is not the best for that style of chopping. You would want a bigger belly for that, but you know, trade-offs, right? Every blade shape has its trade-offs. This knife is called the Kikirikiri, and it's a pun. And it is based off the greeting of Kiara, Kikiriki. Kiri means knife. We want to make this because Kiara's theme is obviously orange and phoenix, and so I was like, let's do a feather pattern knife. If we can make this look like a feather and make it also seem like it's on fire with the copper Damascus, then this would work perfectly for Kiara's knife. When we were thinking about that, it was also like, for all the handwork and all the difficulty and all the rejects that have to happen, we have to price this at like $800, $1,000. How many people are actually gonna be able to buy this? I understand that right now at $280, it's not the most affordable knife in the world either. When we're designing this knife, we have to think about every single trade-off that we have to do in order to make it as functional, as pretty, as close to what we want as we can, while keeping it in the range of affordability. This is a sanmai construction. That is to say, it is 3 layers, and the cutting edge over here is going to be pure VG10, while the outside of the blade is going to be in the Damascus with copper. It is actually called Sus 420. So it is a Sus 420 copper Damascus sanmai. VG10 will keep its edge significantly longer than this kind of knife. Something like this uses a steel called X50 CRMOV 15. This is a very cheap steel. It does not hold an edge very long, and it is made for cheapness of machinability. The difference between hardness and toughness, glass, which is very, very hard and can cut for a very, very long time, but is very brittle and can break very easily. This piece of paper is very tough because it's not going to shatter. So it's very tough, but it's not hard. Now, these kind of old style knives are made this way because they expect people to do this. Do not do that with your knives. Why they make these thick, big black handles and these super thick spines. They expect people to be slamming it and scraping it and twisting it and doing all kinds of abuse to the knife. Our VG10 steel that we chose, on the other hand, is originally a Japanese steel made by Takanashi, and it is a high hardness steel with a lot of vanadium, which helps the knife keep its edge. Are the grooves on the back pointy and need to be handled with care? No. And as you can see, no, they're not sharp. And I've heard some people be like, can I put the back of my hand on it and chop still? Yes, you absolutely can. That being said, why are you putting your hand over here? You know, the fulcrum point, if you want to be doing that style of chopping, it should be like this. It should be more towards the tip. So there's a little tip for you. That'll make your life a lot easier. And then for those people who are like, I use it over here to bash on the blade, just don't do that. You shouldn't be doing that in the first place. If it's something so hard, you need a thicker, heavier knife for that. This is not what this is for. This is a general purpose knife, not an all-purpose knife. Sharpness is literally how microscopically thin your edge is. And this is a knife that is designed for good cutting. That means do not smash it on bone. Do not smash it on ice. Do not do this. Yes, you can debone a chicken with this. Just don't smash it through bone. Is the knife full tang? It does not matter. So, full tang is a myth. If this knife were full tang, it would cost significantly more for zero benefit to you. That would mean we need this much more steel for nothing. Why full tang was considered good in the past is because knife steel was really garbage back then. It was very easy to have knives that would break from bad heat treatments, from steels that were just very subpar. Even these cheap knives that I have here are going to be leagues above the kind of steel that was used in the past when you were worried about something like full tang. The only way you would break this knife and this part would snap is if somehow you're applying pressure to the handle here. Let's think about that for a little bit. Why would we apply so much pressure over here that we are snapping steel? What are you doing if you're snapping steel over here? You can see how incredibly thick it is, and it is extremely, extremely heavy. It will fatigue your hand more. The thing about these kind of drop forged blades is that they do have these large bolsters here, which is integral to how you would create a tang. The reason they are made like this is to defend against bad steel, which I say, why not just pick a good steel to begin with? I know, crazy concept, right? If you have a good steel and you are expecting people to use the knife correctly, or even close to correctly, where you're not smashing the handle on something for some reason, then you don't need to design for a full tang. It's a bunch of waste, a bunch of weight, and a bunch of additional costs for absolutely zero reason. I've seen some people want to argue this point and die on that hill, which, okay, let's talk about that. This is the most expensive knife I own. One of those kind of knives that are so rare and so prized that even if you have the money to buy a knife like this and you do not have the skill to use this knife, they will not sell it to you. Luckily, because I used to be I used to cook at Michelin star restaurants, they did let me buy this. This was, 120,000 yen? Why do they not let just anyone buy this knife? The edge is so thin behind it, it's very easy to damage for someone who does not have good edge alignment, for someone who does not have good knife technique, and someone who might not be taking care of it right. It also rusts very, very easily, and while it is a beautiful knife, and it is made extremely well, has extremely high hardness, it is something you have to take care of a lot. And this beautiful knife that is worth so much does not have a full tang. Why? Because it's not necessary. Because the edge will break much, much earlier than the neck will. And any good knife will also be in that category. Because once again, a good knife has a thin edge. A thin edge is what makes a knife sharp, is what makes a knife feel good when you're cutting with it. I would just assume the joinery in the handle is very well done. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you. It's glued. there is a certain amount of craftsmanship you want to be putting into some parts of the knife. For instance, for this knife, the craftsmanship is in the blade. This is the functional part of the knife. It is also the largest part of the knife that contains the prettiest part of the knife. So we put most of the cost into the blade and a lot of the cost into the handle as well. Every single handle is made by hand. These knives are all sharpened, polished, and checked by hand. The shape itself is stamped, not forged. You can't actually forge in this style very easily without incurring huge amounts of cost. When we're talking about what costs go into a knife, it's going to be about the utilitarianism and then also the craftsmanship of it. Does this knife cut 4 times better than this? 5 times better than this? Absolutely not. Oh, also this one's also epoxied in, by the way. It is sealed with resin. Even this $1,200 knife. For something like this, we're not paying because its utility is so high. It's being paid for the craftsmanship that goes into it and the special skill to make a knife like this. When creating a custom knife like the Kiara, we balance utilitarianism with the craftsmanship and understand where do we want to put the most amount of cost? Where is the most effective way to create this knife in a way that is cost effective and still allows us to achieve everything that we want. This knife originally, if you were to look at copper Damascus knives a very, very long time ago, once again, I don't have one. This is my first copper Damascus knife as well. They're rare because copper Damascus is significantly harder to do. And yes, for anyone who's like, this is not Damascus, literally everyone in the industry says this is Damascus. I always need to say that because there's always gonna be someone in the comments or someone talking about, oh no, this isn't Damascus. Yes, it is Damascus. That's just what the word means. Anyway, some of the problems with old copper Damascus is that it would patina very easily. Statue of Liberty used to be a nice orange color as well. It's now green. Same concept. This does not use pure copper. This uses a copper alloy, which means that it is much more stain resistant, and it does still oxidize slowly over time. But luckily, what you can do with this one is if you just get a little bit of lemon juice or strong vinegar and you rub that on there, then it will return the color. I think if you just use this knife a lot, because food is generally acidic, it will also just kind of clean itself in a way. Knife balance is one of the very interesting things. Everyone has a different preference on knife balance. These are stupidly handle heavy, which also makes it very hard to use. For a lot of chefs, a very blade heavy knife will feel better, but is harder to control. So for a more general purpose knife, we kind of want the balance towards the middle, right where you pinch. That's just gonna give the most control for the general purpose use. So you can see, I hate doing this because I am bad at balancing, but this is where I pinch the knife. And this is where it balances. So we kept the knife balance right in the middle there to make it easy to use and to make it, generally speaking, something that is accessible for everyone. Don't hammer grip! I want you to hammer grip that subscribe button instead, and make sure you hammer grip the notification bell too. That's the only time you should hammer grip. Or when you're using a hammer, I guess. That works too. YouTube thumbnails, right?